question, go ahead and raise your hand. I will do my best to make sure I acknowledge you, and we'll get the mic over as quick as possible. Okay, right here in the front row.
One of the speakers brought up Reconstruction, and it really feels like we are living in a time that's very much like that period after the Civil War, where the advances that were made are being brutally suppressed. Post-Reconstruction, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And you know, without getting overly political, you know, we're facing fascism in this country, and I would like to hear people directly address that.
Okay, I am representing the state of New Jersey, and so I cannot give any of my personal opinions. One thing I will note though, I always do this shameless plug. I'm a life member of the Association of African American Museums. The conference is coming to Philadelphia, August 19th to 21st. One thing that has kind of stayed with me that happened at a previous conference, I think it was last year's conference, where we spoke, where we learned just how much federal funding our Black institutions and institutions that are doing projects focused around African American history and culture, how much funding they lost, so somewhere around like $6 million or something like that. There's also lots of folks around me who have lost their jobs either through resigning or through federal funding agencies being shut down, which is really terrifying because there are also no additional jobs for those folks to go get since there's no more funding. So with that being said, there's a lot of stress being put on private funders at this moment who normally are doing the big multi-million-dollar projects, and now our small organizations that don't have grant writers on staff are trying to figure out how to get those funds that are the ones that are still available to them at the federal level, and also the national private funders, which is really, really a struggle. So, with that being said, I, in my capacity as project manager for a historical marker project, right? One thing I've been doing is looking for ways that our privately owned sites are able to either fundraise, identify sponsors, go for smaller grants, or go for large grants together and present at national conferences so that people are aware of the work that they're doing. Because the legislation that established the Black Heritage Trail says that we're not able to pay for markers on privately owned sites. We're only able to pay for those that are going on publicly owned sites, so that's owned by any government agency at any level. So we're looking for sponsors, we're looking for grant opportunities to share with folks. But one thing that we are doing in the interim, knowing that many of our sites will not be able to afford their markers, is that we're still making sure to promote them on our social media, on our website, and in any other ways that we can. We write blog posts about them to make sure that folks know that these sites exist. And we're also creating dedicated web pages for each of our approved sites on the Black Heritage Trail to increase their digital visibility. So we're doing basically a whole lot with very little. That's what we're trying to do to combat this moment where a lot of our Black history practitioners are losing funding because of executive orders.
Judge?
Yeah, I'd like to address the gentleman's comments, and again, these are strictly my opinion. I don't disagree with you. In terms of what do we do, it's, I guess, what we did in the 60s. I know that sounds not like much.
Yeah.
People have got to vote. The young people have got to vote. People of color have got to vote. That, everyone's got to vote. It stuns me when I look at statistics about the number of people who vote in elections. It's really embarrassing. There are about 22 countries and nations in the world where voting is mandatory. Okay, I don't think that'll happen here. But how about having, for example, a national holiday where everyone gets a day off and votes? We have national holidays for a lot of things. Some of them really, really worthwhile, and others not so much. But I'm not going to be the judge of that. Yeah. The other thing is, people make fun of lawyers. I know a lot of lawyer jokes, being one. A lawyer, and sometimes a joke. But some law firms folded like cheap tents. Most of them did not. And say what you will, the lawyers who are taking these cases and fighting things like executive orders that, in my humble opinion, which is at no moment, exceeds the authority of the executive branch. Those, and their organizations too. There's numerous organizations besides private lawyers, but there are a lot of private lawyers and law firms taking that after. Educating people and getting people out to vote. I'm sorry, I wish I had a better solution, but in the 60s, when people were getting killed and shot, their houses were being burned down, the local police were assisting the Klan, we made progress, right? It's gone back. The courts have changed to some degree, although I think the lower courts are really doing their job. So I think those are, and peaceful demonstrations, and I say peaceful because one of the things we have to do in this country is show a little bit more, I know it's hard sometimes, a little more respect for one another, a little more civility for one another. That sounds corny to some, but to be civil to one another can sometimes help you move forward. I have a lot of other things to say, but I'm not going to do it.
To the judge's point, this last year we had the gubernatorial election. It was the highest turnout gubernatorial election in about 3 decades. The number escapes me.
Yeah, I think it was 60%.
Yeah, I think so.
Like that.
I wrote about it, so just go to WHYY.org. I did the data analysis. But my point is, think about what it took for that many people to get out to vote for governor. And as I said on David Cruz's web show, I said it on NJPBS. You basically had people who were pissed off by the current president in real time that motivated them to go out to vote. Not to preach, but just to put that out there.
Can I throw in one more comment?
Yes.
So our museum is new. We opened to the public in 2017, and our original mission was just open a museum. But once we'd accomplished that, we really focused in on what are the stories that we feel like we're already telling, and what are the ways that we want to impact the public. And the mission that we settled on was that we wanted to uncover and share compelling stories about the diverse people and the complex events that sparked America's ongoing experiments in liberty, equality, and self-government. And I think the reason I lift that up is obvious, right? An ongoing experiment. People had no idea in the 18th century whether or not this would work. And every decision that was made, they had no idea what the outcome of that was going to be, short-term or long-term. Every negotiation, every agreement that they made, every moment that they made a decision that maybe they didn't love, because if they didn't make that decision, then this loose coalition that was very, very fragile would completely fall apart, and maybe they'd be taken over by the same European power or other European powers. They had no idea what was going to come next. But one of the big fears that they had, and you can see this when it comes to the Louisiana Purchase, is what happens when you bring in a huge land mass and you don't know how to govern it, because there's more people and they're in many ways different from you. And so how are you going to handle the sharing of information and news, and how are you going to have an education infrastructure and all of these different things? And ain't that just what we're seeing right now? How do you handle a landmass that is this large and this diverse, where information, whether that is correct or incorrect, can spread like that? How do you govern those people and that nation? And so I think for me, it comes back to what is the value of education? How do we convince people that there is such a thing as a fact? How do we build a community that believes in civil civic engagement? And what is the engagement that we need to have with people who we disagree with? in order to move the needle in a more positive direction. Because staying in our echo chambers and our bubbles has not worked. It's comfortable. It sounds like it feels good to cut people off sometimes, right? Because then you don't have to deal with that stress and that struggle over Thanksgiving dinner or whatever it is. But that doesn't move the needle. So when do we go back to feeling uncomfortable so that real education and real change can happen?
Okay, hi. I wanted to thank everyone on the panel and everyone for being here. My name is Mona Washington. I'm from Sentiments and I'm really scared. I invite everyone who's concerned about fascism to take some time and come to the President's house in Philadelphia. I don't know if you're aware of what's going on with the signage. I'm on the board of the Avenging Ancestors Coalition, and we fought really hard to get that monument put up. And it is scary what's going on now. I wanted to echo and to thank the judge. I had the pleasure of clerking for Constance Baker Motley. And
Wonderful.
one of the things she told me, and I think people forget, is that, you know, when the civil rights workers went down south, depending on who you were, people, the local people were really powerful because they had to find places for the lawyers to stay, you know, segregation. So my point is, I think we have more power than we think in a lot of situations, you know? So, you know, oh, this person has to argue for the Supreme Court. Where can they stay? Oh, well, who's wealthy enough in the town to put up the legal team so they can speak at night before they go and argue? It might be the black doctor. It might be, you know, the people at a certain church. And not that it's exactly the same parallel here, but I want to invite everyone here to get involved with what's going on in Philadelphia. It is really scary. I am a retired lawyer, and things that people said in law school, that'll never happen. Really, people go, oh, that'll never happen. It's happening. And we all need to be involved, that's all.
Okay, I just have one on the front row.
Let me thank all of you for this wonderful program. I especially want to thank Adrian for bringing it to my attention. I live in North Delaware, and I really appreciate having known about this so I could be here. The question I have is, could each of you on the panel recommend a book to read? Something that's really moved and spoken to you in the last year or so.
And I forget, you told me the name, I think, of the Rick Atkinson. It's not like the kind of history you get, well, this happened, there was a war, these people were there, those people were there. It really gets into the nitty-gritty, including what you were talking about, what everyone was talking about, the diversity of those who fought in the war. You know, everybody thinks it's you know, guys, it's white guys with big hats, and
Drums.
I'm sorry?
And drums.
Yeah, and drum. That's right, I was a drummer boy, I forgot. But I'm still reading it, but he brings history to life, you know, real nitty-gritty.
What is the title?
The Revolutionary War. I think, I can't remember exactly, but it's the second of 3 volumes. My son recommended it to me.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would recommend Freedom Dreams by Robin Kelly. Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination by Robin D.G. Kelly. It's a book that takes the perspective of Black radical imagination, Black-led social movements, focused primarily on the 20th century, but I think it gives a great perspective on different aspects of it.
I would recommend Song in a Weary Throat. It is Pauli Murray's memoir. Number one, I've named my cat after her. His name is Pauli Curry. But also, she wrote, his middle name is Moses after him, so just so you know. His full name is Prince Pauli Moses Furry Esquire, attorney at Paul. So anyways, She wrote the book that became what Thurgood Marshall called the Bible of the Civil Rights Movement, because it changed the strategy to attacking the unconstitutionality of the law itself. And then they started, I think Board v. Brown of Education is where he implemented that strategy. And it also goes into her childhood, originally from Maryland, but grew up in North Carolina, in Durham. The Pauli Murray Center down there is doing fabulous work, maintaining her legacy. She's also a queer woman. She is an Episcopal priest. She is all of the things. And my favorite thing about her is how she was able to reinvent herself multiple times throughout her career. She's a writer, she's a poet. She was best friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. She has so many different pieces of her life that kind of all build on each other, but also show us how, as individuals, we can get involved in these movements in very practical ways.
All right, I'm going to say 3 things. One of them is that we've created a reading list of selected books that have to do with African Americans in the American Revolution that we provide to educators when we give professional development workshops. And so anybody who is interested in receiving, I'm happy to email that to you. Just give me your email address after this program ends. If you're watching this later on, email education@amrevmuseum.org, and I'm happy to send it to you. And then in terms of book recommendations, I'm going to give you 2. One of them is from Jeffrey Rosen, who is the former head of the National Constitution Center. He wrote a book called The Pursuit of Happiness recently, where he focuses on what is the meaning of the pursuit of happiness as it reads in the Declaration of Independence. And it's not happiness the way that we think of it today. It's more about cultivating personal virtue. And it's really interesting to think about the idea of civic virtue in American life today. What does it mean to have civic virtue? The other thing, this is going to be a little bit left field, but it's called The Social Life of Books, Reading at Home in the 18th Century. And I think it's fascinating because it's about the culture of learning at home through books and the ways in which people encounter stories and quotes and ideas and all sorts of things like that in a British context mostly, but really interesting to think about how any of us in our own lives cultivate a love of reading and how we build access to stories and the thoughts of the world.
I had this gentleman right here.
Yeah, the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action. What do you guys think about that?
There's always been affirmative action in this country. If you went to Harvard or Yale, or not everybody, there's always been, quote, affirmative action for the privileged in terms of getting jobs, in terms of getting access to educational opportunity. And I happen to think that because of the curse of slavery, it's a perfectly appropriate tool. It was never about quotas, despite what you read. It was helping people along, like Justice Thomas, I believe. Am I correct? You're, who I think went to Yale Law School and as part of a, is that, I don't want to make a misstatement, so.
I think that's the case.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to say, if you don't mind, real quick. Apropos of what you said, and what everyone has said here, I think this is apocryphal, but Ben Franklin supposedly said to a woman, I can't remember her name, at the last day of the Constitutional Convention, when she came out and people were milling around the streets saying, what's going on here? What'd you do? And he said, we created a republic, if you could keep it. We're on the edge. In my opinion.
One word that continues to come up here tonight is civility. And that is something that we really hold on to and lean into. Our motto is celebrating our commonalities and building a more harmonious community. That's what we endeavor to do. We try to do it by bringing multiple generations together, multiple races together, multiple sexes together. And so thank you for sharing that experience with us tonight. And we're going to close on a high note a higher note, not an equally high note. Again, I invite our mayor back. He has some special gifts to present to our experts. Thank you again for coming tonight, and hope you'll come back. Did you talk about the marker at the corner?
I did not.
Oh.
There is a marker at the, at the intersection of Ellis and Potter Street in Haddonfield, for those who will be watching later. And it is in honor of the historic Black community that was once here. Please go and check it out. It is gorgeous, if I do say so myself. It's white with gold trim. You can't miss it. It's right there on the corner of Ellis and Potter Streets. And I think that's all I have.
And it does look good because I saw it on the drive over here.
It's huge. You can't miss it.
And it has a bench, that you could sit and relax there. The bench was donated by Commissioner Al Dansbury. Thank you.
Well, this made a lot more sense in the wintertime. But we wanted to present you with the proclamation, and I'm going to read the proclamation and then hand it out. This was for Black History Month. Whereas each February, Haddonfield, along with communities throughout our country, are in the midst of a month-long observance of Black History Month. And whereas Americans are aware of the election of this country's first African-American president, Barack Obama, Jackie Robinson's contributions to baseball, and General Colin Powell's military leadership in Desert Storm, few probably could pinpoint college founder Mary McLeod Bethune's contributions to education, or identify astronomer Benjamin Banneker. And whereas ignorance of such facts is what led Carter G. Woodson, son of former slaves, to create the first Negro History Week in February 1926, a culmination of the separate efforts of Mary Church Terrell of the National Council of Colored Women and the African American Collegiate Fraternity Omega Phi Psi, which became Black History Month in 1976. And whereas February was selected because Frederick Douglass, a staunch human rights advocate, and Abraham Lincoln, another defender of equality among mankind, were both born that month. And whereas the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History, the ASNLH, chose this year's theme to be African Americans and the Arts, which spans the many impacts Black Americans have had on visual arts, music, cultural movements, and more. Whereas Haddonfield takes pride in its role as a community that participates in the route of the Underground Railroad during the Civil War years to help save African slaves from lives of treatment as merchandise, rather than human beings. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the Board of Commissioners of the Borough of Haddonfield, along with the Haddonfield Human Relations Commission, proclaim the month of February 2026 as Black History Month. And I'd like to present a copy of that proclamation. Thank you.
This concludes the program for this evening.